Hey, all you subscribers and fans that are watching these episodes. A couple episodes ago, episode 46, we talked about my early days of getting into the monster truck, and we had a lot of people comment, and they're really liking that. So this episode, we're going to talk about how I got started with War Wagon. So basically, I was running the Overkill truck, and this War Wagon project was really there was not a name or anything, but I grew up around old Chevy cars with my dad, so, what better for a monster truck than an old 55 Chevy sedan delivery body. So we got that back, it was back before I even got really started, and I was kind of working on it a little bit here and there. Actually, it was in Jerry Richmond's shop up until just a couple weeks before the fire that happened in April. So I had it there, and he was helping me do the main hoops and the roll cage and stuff, and I got it back to my shop. Well, then a couple weeks later was when his shop burned, and that's when Overkill burned up, and kind of my dream with the team Overkill kind of was lost there. Marty, it was such a huge undertaking for Marty and Jerry to be able to even build one truck, let alone two. So I decided I would just kind of go on my own, but I wasn't really sure where it was going to go. So I was booked, I think it was the first part of May. Should have had Overkill in Erie, Pennsylvania with Aaron Paulburn and the Thunder Nationals. So I went ahead and went, even though the truck was gone. But we were all big families, so it kind of just went for the fun of it. So went to Erie, and I had a couple snapshots of the War Wagon. It was just the frame, and I had 5-ton axles under it, and I already had wheels and tires mounted, and I had the fiberglass body, and I had it setting on there with just the main couple hoops of the roll cage. And I actually showed those pictures to Aaron because he kept asking, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't really know right now. I probably have to go back to work for my dad in the body shop. And he looked at those pictures, and he goes, well, what are you thinking? And I said, well, I was thinking about painting it this really cool pearlescent pinkish purple color that my dad had painted a 59 El Camino, one of his hot rods in his collection. And the color, pictures and video just don't do that color justice. In person, that thing really had a neat color. So I showed him a picture of that car, and of course, in the early 90s like this would have been in May of 93. Aaron was, the pink was kind of a hot color right at the time. And he says, well, what are you going to call the thing? I said, I have no idea. He goes, I tell you what, he says, that thing's going to be really neat. He says, you name it War Wagon, be in Mansfield, Ohio in July, and he says, I will book you solid for all of 94. And of course, that was just kind of a dream come true, but really didn't understand the scope of the challenge. So we got home. I hit up my dad, and I said, man, here's my opportunity. So between my dad and the bank and everything I could do, I borrowed every dollar I could borrow to be able to do, to build this truck. And so I started, of course, back in them early days was a lot different than nowadays. I don't think people really grasp, unless you lived it back then, you don't really grasp the magnitude. Now you can buy a chassis, you can buy every component of a monster truck from somebody. There's a lot of guys building parts. Well, back then, you pretty much had to build it yourself. Well, I had ran the axle deal by Aaron, and he said, nope. He says, we've had bad luck with trucks with 5-ton axles. You got to have planetaries. I said, okay, well, I got to figure that out. So through a connection, I bought my first set of 106 axles that was already completed from a guy. I kind of got the same deal as most of the guys in the early days. If you didn't build it yourself, you usually got taken advantage of. So I bought these axles that were supposed to be able to be just mounted under the truck and ready to go. One funny thing is the front axle, actually the planetaries on it came out of the #1 Thumper truck, if you guys remember the Thumper truck. So that was kind of a neat little artifact, but back then we didn't really worry about parts being saved because of significances from other vehicles and things. But So I kind of took advantage on the axles. I paid top dollar for some, and there was a lot of issues. Kind of learned the hard way on that, but we put them under the frame, started welding up more roll cage in it. All the main frame rails and the spring hangers and everything I welded up with a stick welder, believe it or not, and even the axles, when I started mounting all the brackets on it, we used a stick welder because didn't really trust MIG welders. You know, that was something that was kind of new. It was used in production world in factories and things, but you know, we really didn't have any experience, and I didn't really have much experience with a MIG welder. And actually, we didn't even have one when I got started, but my dad kind of seen where he had talked to some different people, and they said, man, you know, you guys really need a MIG welder. Trying to build a roll cage and stuff, it's going to be a nightmare with a stick welder. And so my dad actually bought a MIG welder for the body shop, and then I got to use it and kind of cut my teeth on it. So that really helped. But then had a lot of friends back in those days that came out. You know, they'd get off work, they'd come out and help in the evenings, and everybody was excited. You know, that was a pretty neat opportunity for everybody to be a part of it. I remember a bunch of them was out, and we decided we needed to cut rubber off the tires. So I had 2 or 3 guys, my cousin, and a bunch of my friends. They'd come out every night, and they'd use the tire groover and just trim and cut on them tires. It took unbelievable amount of hours cutting the rubber off the tires, and we kept saving all the rubber chunks in boxes, you know, thinking that we were really saving a lot of weight. And I remember we weighed the box when we was all done with one tire, and it amounted to about 70 pounds, which, you know, was quite a bit, but it wasn't what we were expecting. But you know, they was already bald tires to begin with, so it worked out pretty good. So anyways, had a lot of rough times there. I mean, it was a short amount of time to build that truck. Luckily, all my friends came out and was helping, and then and I was working on it round the clock. I was staying up, not even going to bed several nights, and got with an engine builder, bunch of spare parts and pieces. I think Andy Hoffman, back in those days, I think that was when we became friends way back then, and he was doing a lot of stuff with pulling trucks and tractors, so he helped me get a lot of the parts and mostly used stuff. I got with an engine builder that put it together for me. That was another learning experience. They charged me way more than they probably should have. Kind of took advantage, and then I had a lot of motor problems, but luckily when we finally got it to the first show, Mike Vauders was there. We had 2 days of displays with the War Wagon before the show in Mansfield, and I had so many motor problems I couldn't get it running, and I talked with Mike Vauders before on the phone, and he said, just get it to Mansfield and I'll help you get it running. So luckily Mike, you know, he jumped right in there, and we worked round the clock for 2 days and basically rebuilt the motor in the chassis and fixed all the problems we had. And it was kind of funny, the truck actually did not run until about 3 hours before our show. The show on Friday, the truck, I finally got it running about 3 hours or 4 hours before the show. I was so exhausted, I was ready to give up, and then the steering didn't work. It just so happened I bought the orbiter steering valve from the same guy I bought the axles from. So we actually tore it all apart on the trailer. We tore it all apart, had no idea what we was looking at. We started putting it back together. We got it back together, and it was missing 3 or 4 washers, and it was missing a bunch of stuff. And we put it on, fired the motor up, and actually the steering worked, but it worked backwards. So I had to take all the hoses off, you know, and turn them on the other ports, which a lot of guys have done with hydraulic steering. That usually happens. You hook it up backwards and you turn the opposite way. So, but it was horrible. It was like a 15-turn steering box. I mean, so I had to turn like 15 times to get the tires to turn, you know, one direction. Boy, it was horrible. But luckily we met some people there too, Jim and his wife from Mansfield, and he ran a tow truck. And I tell you what, those people were so nice, because we were on these displays, and he would come over in the evening and use the winch on the tow truck and winch the truck back up on the trailer, and then I would wide load it to the next place, and he came and helped. When we were fighting with the motor parts, needing motor parts, he was out retrieving parts. I don't know where he got them at, but he would leave at 9, 10 o'clock at night and come back with parts, and man, he never even charged us for them. I mean, he was just a super good fan. So I got through that first show. We didn't really do anything too exciting. My motor had a tunnel ram on it with 2 Predators. I might have had 400 horse if I was lucky. Of course, the axles had driveline brakes already on them, but they were sheet metal that they had welded on without using any kind of a jig or a lathe or anything. So them suckers went like this. They were just horrible. So I'd hit the brake pedal and you'd have these really bad shakes. I had aluminum drive shaft loops. That's another funny thing. I think the second or third show I did with the truck, it just kept getting a little bit better every time, but the MTRA actually got rid of aluminum drive shaft loops because of me. I was going down the back stretch of a racetrack, and the thing had so many vibrations because the drive shafts I bought from the same guy, I got the axles. The pinion yokes, he had took drive shaft yokes and welded them to the pinions. I mean, it was just a mess. It ended up, between all the vibrations, it ended up shucking the drive shafts out of the truck because I had too much speed buildup, and those aluminum drive shaft loops it disintegrated. So the drive shaft went all over the place. We never did find the brake rotors. Luckily, we was on the back side of a racetrack, and we have no idea whatever happened to the brake rotor. We never did find that. But took out the oil pan on the truck. I strung oil all over the racetrack. Those were, not overly great time there, but every show I would take the money from it and help pay off debt, and I would just keep working on it. And then I actually got to do the Pontiac Silverdome at the end of '93. That was in November, and that was pretty cool. I got to race Wildfoot with Andy Brass driving. He was having some motor troubles. Of course, I had no horsepower, and I actually beat him to the corner, which was pretty unheard of. I never expected I'd be able to do that good. And then I got to go out and do freestyle. They would pair us up back then, and there'd be 2 trucks at the same time doing freestyle. So Charlie Pauken and me, he was driving Excalibur. We went out and kind of did some freestyle together. But so then, that was, we got through '93. And by November or so was my last show, and then I had some time. And actually what was kind of cool too is in September I took it to the Indianapolis Jamboree just to display it. And of course that was when the Pin to Point series was going on. And Dwayne Elliott from Off-Road Magazine hit me up, and that was back when they really was just getting out of doing monster trucks in magazines. And he was the editor of Off-Road Magazine. He hit me up and said, I want to do a feature on this War Wagon. He said, this is very unique and very neat. So he actually came to my dad's place the next day when we got home. It was on Monday, and it was pouring down rain. It was miserable. It didn't want to quit raining. So we actually did the magazine photo shoot in the rain. And that was kind of neat. But if you look at those pictures in that magazine feature, you'll see that I had a raincoat on, I had mud boots on, and we splashed through the water because there was nothing we could really do with it, other than play in the water a little bit. But you can see in that picture, I didn't even have drive shaft loops or anything at that point because I had already took them all back out because of the aluminum ones exploding and having to fit. I had to come up with a better solution. So that magazine didn't come out until like January of '94, which was right when the '94 season started with the Thunder Nationals.